So, Daisy, welcome to this chat. Thank you for joining me. And yeah, thank you for agreeing to talk with me. How are you? Where are you at the moment?
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm good. I'm good. I'm in London at home. Yeah, how about you?
Amazing.
Yeah, Berlin, as usual. And but before we dive into it, why don't Daisy, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're building, where are you coming from, both professionally but also personally. How do you get where you are today?
Oh, yeah. So I've always worked in fashion, mainly in merchandising and marketing for brands like Burberry and TK Maxx, which was brilliant. And I've loved working in the industry. But about 5 years ago, I started becoming really interested in researching the harmful impact that the fashion industry has on the planet and people. Um, and I realized quite quickly that the work I was doing, although I enjoyed it, it wasn't really aligned with my values anymore. And I really wanted to still remain within the fashion industry, but have a job where I was driving some positive change within it. So I started really small, just made a personal decision to start shopping from smaller, sustainable brands. Discovered all these amazing brands, and I was like, oh, I wish I could shop all of these in one place. So 3 years ago was my first kind of venture into founder life. Did a small crowdfunder and launched an online marketplace for these small sustainable brands called Loft. Um, and it was brilliant, and it felt great to finally be doing something that was aligned with my values. But as I started doing events and me started meeting my customers and speaking to them, I realized that a lot of people, most of us, want to shop sustainably, but we really struggle to find sustainable clothes that are our style or that fit us correctly. Or if we've made that decision to start shopping sustainably, we don't want to be keep on buying new clothes. We have all these clothes in our wardrobes that we don't wear. So what can we do with those? So I started working with designers and seamstresses I knew to make upcycled and bespoke clothing, and it was super exciting. Like my customers were so happy. They had so much more value given to these clothes because they knew the designers, they were involved in that process, and it was kind of like a moment of wow, this is really special. People don't really realize that they can connect with designers in this way, and if there was a platform that could make that super easy and accessible, it would be amazing. So that gave me the idea for Loom, and now Loom's just launched. So yeah, so Loom basically is like a Fiverr for fashion designers. So it connects you with our designers to make upcycled and bespoke clothing.
Amazing. Love that one liner as well. It makes it so clear. And how are the users engaging with the platform today? Do you have a website? Do you have a mobile app?
Yeah, so at the moment, it's a website. So it's loom.fashion. You can go there, post a project, tell us what you're looking for, and you can chat to our designers directly through the platform. But currently fundraising and hoping to turn it into a mobile app soon.
Amazing. That's good. And this so many questions come to mind because it makes total sense, right? To be in direct contact with designers and this process that I think we talked about this before. I can relate to it from my family, growing up in Venezuela. It was something that happened. People used to, find it was not potentially a designer but a seamstress and order their clothes. But how are your users at the moment using it? Is it a that they get clothes for a special occasion? Is it a one-time thing? Are they working with designers to kind of like upcycle the things that they have? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's been a real mixture, and it's really interesting to see what people are using it for. We've had a few bespoke requests, for example, for dresses for wedding rehearsal dinners, or even their actual wedding dress. But most of the requests have been for upcycling projects. So we've had, thinking of some examples, some people have bought like a maxi dress and wanted to turn it into a two-piece because they don't wear the dress that often or the shape's not quite right, but they love the fabric and the print. We've had brides want to upcycle their wedding dresses into like a different, like a jumpsuit, for example, or dye it a different color so that they continue to wear it and it doesn't just sit in their wardrobes. And we've also had people coming through wanting to mend or repair or just alter clothes that they already have, but they've just stopped wearing them because, for one reason, maybe the shape's not quite right or it's got a small tear in it or something like that. So it's been quite interesting to see all the different things that come through and kind of finding those solutions for them.
That's so cool. It sounds like, the dream of like circular fashion. Uh, but it also, I mean, I cannot help myself to think about the challenges that it has. And probably you're getting this question from investors as well. Like, how, how do you face the challenge of scaling this, both from the user point of view, because, we all, well, it depends on the target audience that you're going after, right? But it could also get quite expensive to do this, I would imagine. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And also from the designer point of view, because as they grow and they get more recognized and famous, I think they also want to, you know, jump into the next tier, and then they probably fade out of the platform somehow. I'm making a bunch of assumptions. How do you see that?
Yeah, so good question, and there's a lot to kind of unpick with that. So I'll do my best. So with the customer side, so how we make it easy and accessible. So at the moment, it's early days. I'm doing a lot of the matchmaking manually in the background, but what will happen is we'll use like AI to scan all of the designers, all of the work that they do, and we'll be able to tell you, or Loom will be able to tell you. So if you say, oh, I want to upcycle this, we'll be able to tell you what we could turn it into, which designers you should get in contact with, how much it could cost, etc. So it's all automatic and super quick. With the cost, so with upcycling, it's around £100, depending obviously on how detailed the project is. And bespoke starts at around 300. Um, with the more the designers that we get, the cheaper it gets for our customers as well. Because, say, you're looking for a specific style, if we have lots of designers who already have, say, the patterns made for a similar style, that really helps to keep the cost down. Because most of the cost is when the designer has to completely design something from scratch. So it's their time that you're paying for. So there's some network effects too, where the more designers we have, the cheaper it is for our customers. So building on that. And for the designers, scaling those, we are partnering with small brands, small designers in particular. So they can tell us as well if they are super busy and they actually don't need any work, or actually they're actively looking for more projects to take on. So it's super flexible for the designers and also works as like a software solution for them, because a lot of the designers I've spoken to, they want to take on more bespoke orders, but there's so much admin and customer service and the risk of like if they don't have the right contracts. So Loom provides them with a way to easily manage that so that they can spend more time designing. And so we're kind of providing that solution for them, and at the same time partnering with universities to help fashion graduates on board onto Loom. So we're hoping to keep building the community and kind of support those upcoming designers as well as people who are more established.
Yeah, I mean, makes total sense as you want to cultivate this, this community on both ends, right? And how do you see the near future of upcycling and bespoke clothing? Is it more going in the direction of reducing the cost and the price for the consumer, or is it more towards consolidating within this price range, which is perfectly understandable, and it is a segment on its own? Which way do you think it will go?
So I think within fashion as well, this is quite a hotly debated topic, is the idea of price. So I think it's where do you put the value? So when you're working with a designer and you're getting clothes that are tailored to you, they're exactly what you want, you can request anything. Like there's so much value in that. And actually I think being able to get, an upcycled outfit, like for example, if you were doing that dress, a maxi dress into a skirt and top for £100, even if you go to Zara nowadays, if you were to buy two separate things, it would probably cost more than that. So I don't think it's so much about reducing that cost, but more about looking at the value that you get from that. Um, and you're not buying new clothes, you're not contributing, to fast fashion or any kind of negative impacts that could come from buying something. you are using stuff that you already have, and you're becoming part of that circular economy and driving positive change, and also supporting these small designers, which I think there's such a big trend's not the right word, but people more and more are wanting to support small businesses, especially as, the times are getting tough with the cost of living, etc. So I think you also have that connection with these designers and you're supporting them. So you get that value from it as well.
Yeah, I think generally, and this is also something that I find exciting about where the times that we're living now, there is mindset shift uh, towards the value of, what you're describing, the value of repurposing an item, beyond the actual, using it, the value of, you know, the consciousness behind that action. And I think there is also a shift from, valuing these big brands that probably, you might know the designer behind, or you might not, or, it may be kind of like an invisible, kind of like non-personal corporation, and towards working with, people that are putting in their craft and art into what you're receiving. And I think I agree with you. It's less about let's make everything cheaper, and it's more about let's make things valuable from all perspectives, not only from the actual use. So I think that totally rings a bell.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we were talking before and you were saying, with your family and that they would normally go to a tailor, it's weird to think that that was kind of originally how the fashion industry started. And then we've kind of got to this place where you just go into a shop and you pick something up and you don't even really think about how it's come into existence and what that process has been and who's made it. So it's almost like a full circle. Now we're coming back and reconnecting you with those people and making it more personal and valuable in like a sentimental way, as well as, the quality of the product.
Yeah, it's very weird, but I think I'm happy that that's how it's turning out to be. That we're going back to those basics, and I feel like it's happening in other industries. For example, I think even with food, I'm pretty sure there used to be a time where we valued highly processed and canned foods as, the pinnacle of, I don't know, yeah, gastronomy. And now we're going back to let's buy organic and, um, uh, less processed and so forth. So I think it's coming along with, how our society is moving. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that I think we're both in the same wagon, and in our companies trying to, help in changing that direction. And Daisy, what about I mean, how this is for sure a personal topic to you, right? How do you balance, the you being so connected to it personally, and also the struggles of, founding a company? Have you found that challenge in these days?
Yeah, so do you mean in terms of like how do you balance the like life of a solo founder with the yeah. It's been, I think it's tricky, and it's something I'm always trying to be conscious of, because especially as a solo founder, I don't have co-founders to kind of bounce ideas off of. And I think this is actually a lesson I learned from my first business, was that when I was working on that, I spent so much time on my own and in my own head, and I think I wasn't speaking to enough people and getting their thoughts and opinions, not intentionally, but it was more just I've got so much to do, I'm just going to get my head down and just crack on. But what I've learned, especially through being on like an accelerator and now fundraising and going to all these like events, that networking with people, as much as I used to hate that word, but like meeting other founders like yourself and going to events, it's really important. One, to take myself out of my own head and just to like get other perspectives, see what other people are doing, get ideas, not only on the business, but how they're kind of coping as a founder as well, and like different things that you can do to help support yourself. And it's nice just to know that you're not the only person that's kind of struggling with, balancing so much. And I think it's really important to have that support network around you and people that you can go to. I was actually speaking to someone about this recently and just saying that you'd think that you could go to like family and friends a lot and for support. And I think you definitely can. But if they don't have their own business and they're not in the same situation, it's hard because although they can be like sympathetic, they don't really sometimes get exactly what you're talking about. And so I've had conversations and I've wanted to get more support. So sometimes I think you can only get that real understanding from people who are going through the same thing. So I think it's really important to make sure you have, those other people, founders that you go to for that kind of business and like moral support as well when you're having like a down day and you're like, oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah, I totally agree. And you said that networking used to be a word that you shy away from, or like, same in my case. It was not necessarily my favorite word, but I do agree with what you're saying. Having this network of founders, and for whoever is listening that might be frustrated or scared of like, I don't have that network, and I don't want to, how annoying it is I don't have it right there and I need to build it. First of all, it's worth it. And second of all, it also comes naturally. I don't know if that happened to you, but in my case, somehow, I connected with other founders. If you're, probably it's part of the path, you're on it, and it will happen anyways. That you're gonna meet others, and with some of them you'll click and you'll build this relationship that's gonna help you. Um, but yeah, it's really, it makes a difference. But if I understand correctly, you were a solo founder before, and you're again starting on your own. Um, do you want to change that? Do you want to bring someone into this journey with you?
Yeah, I would love to. I am looking for, so I'm a non-technical founder, so ideally, in an ideal world, I'd love to meet my dream technical co-founder. And I am looking, but it's just such a big decision because, I mean, I think this gets said a lot, but it's almost like a marriage. So you're going to be working with them all the time and make some big decisions, and also they need to share the same vision for Loom. So it's a big ask to find in someone. So I'm definitely open to it, but yeah, it just needs to be the right person.
Yeah, I absolutely. I started before starting Looks. I spent my time, as a founder in residence at Merantix and their program, as I mentioned before to you. And during this process, I was by myself, for a good amount of the year, and then we started Looks. And before I found Alexandra, my co-founder, there was also a period of time where I was by myself, and it is the best advice that you could ever get, to spend time getting to know that person, um and making sure that you have those tough conversations early on, um, because that's the only way that in which you can ever figure it out. It's not a normal job application where you sell yourself. You gotta almost challenge that from both ends, because you both want to be sure. um, but was there any particular, um, did you try to get a co-founder before in your previous company?
No, I didn't actually. It didn't really cross my mind before. Um, I think it's become more on my radar now just because it is a tech product that I'm making, whereas before it was like a Shopify site and I could manage all of that kind of level of tech myself. So it's kind of more out of necessity, but also I've realized how much more value having a co-founder would be, not just from the technical side, but the business, the vision, the support side of it as well. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. What about, how is it being in London, starting a company in London? What has been your experience so far? What would you do differently if you had to do it all over again? I know it's been a few months, but I'm pretty sure there are learnings already.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything else to compare it to, but from my own experience, there's so much going on in London. I mean, there's events all the time, which sometimes is a bit overwhelming, but it's nice to know that you can go to, you don't have to like it's not difficult to find events to go to, whether that's, a pitching event or just a socializing event. There's lots of support groups for founders in London, which is really great. And I think that's been good. And I think with Loom, that's something I've focused on a lot. That's kind of a lesson from last time that I've learned. Um, I think there's it's almost like there's so much support out there and there's so many accelerators, and it's almost it's gone the other way now where I'm like, which ones are actually valuable? So I think maybe one thing I would have done differently is just maybe doing more research into things before I sign up to things, because your time is so valuable. Um, and I've kind of been a bit of like a yes person. So saying yes to everything and then slowly learning that actually some of these things aren't really worth my time. So maybe just taking a step back occasionally and just being like, okay, what's actually going to provide me enough value, or, give me enough return on investment for my time that it will be useful. And maybe just reaching out to get some reviews or opinions or just some guidance on that. But it feels like an exciting place to be in London, and it's great for meeting other people and hearing ideas.
Yeah, and especially I would imagine for fashion tech. And how have you experienced that? Is there a general interest, especially in this, in the most recent market conditions? Or is there interest for fashion tech investments? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think so. And it seems to be, particularly in circular fashion, there's a lot of new solutions that are coming out, and it feels like it's really gaining momentum. And I think in the fashion industry, I read somewhere that I think circular fashion business models at the moment make up 3% in the UK. I think this is. I'll need to fact check myself. But by 2030, they think it will be a quarter. So it's really growing fast. And there's so many different solutions out there. I think recently we've seen like rental apps really take off. Um, and now there's like swap shops, upcycling. I've seen lots of other upcycling businesses starting. So it feels like it's very early days for the circular kind of fashion. Um, but it feels like it's really starting to gain momentum. Sustainability is a bit of a buzzword, I think, especially for investors. There's lots of like impact VCs now. So it feels like it's kind of early days, but growing momentum. And I'm meeting a lot of other like fashion tech founders out there, and there's some amazing solutions coming out. I mean, like yourself as well. Like there's so many things. So it feels like there's a lot going on, and like it's like just the beginning.
Yeah, I agree, and that's I think helpful for everyone in the ecosystem, because what happens sometimes is that, you know, if it grows, it's also more visible to investors, and of course, if there is consumer demand, it is also more visible to investors, because to be honest, I mean, fashion is not necessarily their day-to-day topic, on most of them, not on all of them for sure, but on the average, VC, I dare to say that fashion might not even be a personal interest, and they might not even relate to the users, problems. How have you managed that? Have you faced those situations at this early in where they don't understand?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it depends who I've spoken to. I think some people like investors I've spoken to don't like the word fashion, and they're like, oh, like low margins. But I think
Hmm.
once they hear more about the technology side and how technology can really drive these businesses forward, then it becomes really interesting. And so I think there's also a part about finding people who do actually get it as well, and not kind of forcing it on people. Like if they don't get it. I mean, my dad's a good example of this. He just doesn't get circular fashion. And so like I've tried to sell him like how it works so many times, and he's just like, no, I don't get it. So I think there's a part as well, like if people don't, then I'm kind of like, okay, that's fine. Like I want people, investors who are actually excited about what I'm doing and passionate about like driving that positivity, which also might, narrow down the investors for me. But I think it's important as well to make sure that the everyone who's involved in the business has got the same vision and values.
It's probably the most important, right? Because you want people for the long run, and things will get tough, and especially in an industry like fashion where it's so dependent on the consumers perceptions and attitudes, right? Personally, what has been sometimes difficult for me has been trying to translate some of what it's mostly emotional and qualitative needs into words and facts, and to translate how pressing those are, how because even when you look at circular fashion, yes, it probably is something that makes more sense from a personal and values point of view than from a monetary point of view today, at least today. I think that in the long term it will be different, and that has been sometimes hard to convey. um, I don't know if anything comes to mind in how have you approached that, if you have that challenge before. How have you know crossed that barrier?
I think it's been trying to back it up with as many facts as possible and comparing it to uh, businesses that have already seen success. So I think the rental apps is a good one for me because they're similar in the fact that it's a circular solution. It's kind of a new idea a few years ago, and now some of these businesses, they get millions of pounds of investment, and it's really taken off. And a lot of them are, community based as well, which is similar to Loom. So I understand, like sometimes it's difficult when you're just talking to get people to understand that kind of like emotional response that you need from customers. But having examples of similar businesses that have shown that traction is one way to get people on board. Um, and then I think sometimes if they don't get that like emotional side of it, it's trying to find facts, like that circular fashion becoming a quarter of the industry and things like that, and numbers to help get people excited and illustrate where the industry is actually moving. Like it's not a feeling, like it is actually what is happening.
Yeah, and I think that the good thing about today is that those numbers are speaking very clearly, right? I mean, there is a shift and there is a preference, and it is of course not mainstream, but we chat with people every day that are radically shifting how they purchase, and you only need a few players to kick off, the wave, and a few key people in a generation to start that. And I think it's happening, and you can see it definitely on how people buy, and how Gen Zers buy, and how potentially Gen Alpha will buy in the near future. Are you targeting a specific, how does your target user looks like today?
So it's more millennials at the moment that we're targeting. But it's interesting. It's kind of at the moment, there's different customer profiles that I think Loom works for. So there's people who are maybe late 20s, late 30s, interested in sustainability and, want to have that solution for those clothes they don't wear in their wardrobe. And then I think there's people who struggle to find clothes that fit. So, for a lot of people, the standard sizing in high street retailers doesn't fit them. So they're getting clothes tailored anyway. So then Loom's connecting them with loads of different designers and styles rather than just going to, one tailor to get stuff adjusted or altered. Um, and then we have like quite a big bridal customer pot as well of people who either want something bespoke or want to upcycle their wedding dress. So it's interesting seeing the different customers coming through, and it's still early days, but tapping into these different communities to see who our early adopters are. But it's interesting what you were just saying before as well, because I think the that technology piece in fashion is really important to make these solutions really accessible for people as well. So although they are big shifts in consumer behaviour, I think there's almost, for that shift to happen, the solutions have to be super easy for people to use. Um, so yeah, I think that's why like technology in the fashion industry right now is so important, because without it, these shifts towards more sustainable and circular practices will take so much longer. And I think it's just um, sometimes people talk about educating consumers, but I think it's more people know, people want to shop sustainably. It's just making it easy for them.
100% agree. I think that's one of the biggest challenges today, and very close to what we do at Looks as well, of how to make that so that you don't have to even think about it. It's just there, and it's just easy to digest, easy to make a decision, and you're making a good decision because it is very easy to buy impulsively. That's probably the easiest thing today, from the moment you get the impulse to actually making it happen, right? So how do we learn how technology is being used on that front to kind of like bring it to the circular and more sustainable end. And speaking of technology, you're coming from a very, very extensive and very cool fashion background. How are you managing, not only integrating the technology that you're building today and, staying ahead of what's happening, um, but also thinking one step ahead. How do you balance this out? How are you educating yourself as well, and to have these conversations also with your team, with your developers and so forth? What's the situation at the moment? Maybe a little bit of context helps.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So I have a CTO, Gil, who's amazing, and he's helping me with, how we're actually going to implement the technology side of it. And at the moment, reaching out to different developers to kind of find that right team. Again, kind of like the co-founder situation, investing a lot of time in meeting different people and finding the right team to kind of help us build it, because I don't want to keep switching teams. Ideally, want to find people who I can trust, who have the skills and are also aligned with like the vision and giving us ideas as well on, how to keep ahead of the trend and make sure that we're always one step ahead. And then I think on a personal level, it's again just reading and being interested and curious. And if I see like an event or a talk about like the future of like fashion technology or AI or anything like that, just being interested and curious and just trying to make sure that I'm involved in those conversations and can understand what's happening, basically.
I think at the end of the day, the ones that do are not the ones that can, but the ones that want, right? So, and I think, when you're building a company, you show that every day. And not only on topics that are potentially more complex like IT, but also on topics that are, weirdly super complex like legal or accounting, for people when you're not coming from working on it on a daily basis. And there are some things that are just you just gotta do, and you'll do it, and you'll make it happen. So I think, yeah, that makes sense. And now speaking more on the personal end, and being in very early stage solo founder, we've talked about the challenge of managing the time, of course, and saying no to things that will not add value. What other challenges come to mind that you have faced and are now in the process of overcoming?
Um, I think it's the also the prioritizing what I'm doing. It's still in a similar vein, but I think it's just I regularly can feel quite overwhelmed because there's just so, like you were just saying, like you have to wear so many different hats and there's so many different parts of the business you have to manage. Like whether that's like a legal bit or then like the technology side of it, or content and social media and advertising. So I think one of the biggest things for me, and I don't know if a lot of people share this, but it's just remembering to like try not to get just swept up in my endless to-do list, but really like, beginning of every day or whenever, just taking a step back and being okay, like what is the like one or two things that are going to have the most impact. I think that's honestly what I struggle with the most, is there's just so much, and it's a lot to just manage that. So making sure that I have clear priorities for the day, but also that I'm looking after myself as well, because it's so easy to. I think normally I have quite a good routine where I'm like, I'm exercising, and I know it may sound a bit boring, but just like I'm doing my meditation or getting outside, or even like seeing friends, and just making sure that I'm still doing that so that I have enough energy to then keep moving the business forward. Because I think it's easy to just like get into panic mode and then be like, oh my God, I need to use every single minute of the day to get everything done. And by the end, I'm so tired that it's taken me twice as long to get stuff done anyway. And it's easy me
Mm,
saying this now because I know I'll probably do this later. But
yeah.
it's trying to remind myself that no, you can like take a break and look after yourself.
Yeah, this was, or it is, it has been and it continues to be the hardest, thing to manage for myself as well. Like to remember how we're all different, regardless of what we're doing, and we work differently and we function differently, and there are things that we need that we just need to embrace, right? I also need to, exercise. I also need to meditate. I need to eat healthy, and you know, there is a lot. I don't know if you felt it, but in founding a company, there is a lot of comparing yourself to how other founders are doing it, right? And there is unfortunately a stereotype of how a founder should live their lives, and and I think that's probably fighting that and staying true to who you are and what works for you. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because last night, so my partner, he's also a founder, and we were at this like pitch event last night, and we had the same conversation, just saying it's so hard because it's kind of weird when you're at an event like that and you see people pitching and you automatically compare yourself, and I think it's one of the worst things you can do, and but you just automatically do it all the time, and I think I've found that I've had to really train myself to like not compare myself to other people and just focus on what I'm doing and like just, staying in my lane and not getting distracted by what's happening outside. But it's so hard. And like it's even like when you hear people's successes, I'm always super happy for them, but then I'm like, oh God, am I doing enough? And that
Yeah.
shouldn't be my first thought. I should be like, oh, that's amazing, and then just carry on with what I'm doing. But it's really hard. It feels like I don't know. And I don't feel like I'm that competitive, but it must be that kind of that energy that kind of fires you on as a founder to like keep going, is that drive. And it's super difficult, I think.
Yeah, it is one thing that has helped me navigate this. It has been thinking that whatever I'm doing at the moment is the best that I can be doing. I'm doing my best, and it is a very new thought and a new approach, because I would used to think that even thinking about this is being mediocre somehow, or settling, or like I can always be doing something else. I'm never doing my best. I can always be doing best, and but this is so harmful as well. It is not sustainable. It might help you power through sometime, um, but then it's you're gonna have this depth in you, and yeah, thinking that I'm doing my best at any time. I think it has helped me a lot. It must be challenging though, having a relationship where you're both founding stuff, because then as you said, you're spending more time with your co-founders sometimes than with your partners. How do you both deal with this?
I actually think it's more helpful like than detrimental, only because we both understand if like one person's like working, I don't know, they have to like get something done, or they have to, we get it that we're both, and we're kind of at the same stage as well. So it's nice in a way because we can kind of share those challenges, and it's intense because we're both working so much, but also we get it when the other person has to do that, so it's kind of helpful in a way. Whereas I think if maybe one of us wasn't and had like a 9 to 5 job, it would be a bit trickier because you're kind of out of sync. So I think it's more helpful at the moment, but yeah, it's when we're both like struggling or both in really intense periods, then it's really tough. But so far it's been quite good for balancing out and like being understanding of the other person, which is good.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it is a tough balance, individually, but you also have support, right? When you're going through stuff, sometimes what a struggle is finding someone you can trust, as we discussed earlier, to go through those problems, and whom better than your partner, right? um and that's a person that you can be fully honest to, and you know for as if you're in the process of finding that network, you have someone right in there ready to talk. Well, probably not all of the time, but but yeah, I could see the benefits of that.
Yeah, no, and it's yeah, I think I'm very lucky in that situation. Um, but also sometimes we all we talk about is work sometimes. So I think it's then trying to like also switch off.
Yeah. And, yeah. No, and speaking of work, and specifically when you look back at your journey, this more traditional fashion companies, and how do you compare your day to day there, the mindset, the attitude, how's compared to founding a company, how big is the gap, and how have you been able to bridge that gap?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Um, I think the benefit of not being a founder and working in a bigger company is that you can kind of give it everything while you're there and then you can switch off when you come home. Um, so I think you have a better work-life balance because you kind of have your work time and then you have very separate time at home. And I think that's a difficult thing to manage because kind of similar to what we were just talking about, that if I set time off, like time off work, I sometimes struggle with feeling guilty that I'm not getting stuff done. And I think that's really difficult and not something I felt guilty about previously. Um, and but I think there's also a lot of skills that that I had from working at these companies that that have been super helpful for me now. So in my old job at Burberry, I was working with loads of different departments around the business, and there was loads going on all the time. So, the skills like, communication and prioritizing and managing like stressful situations has definitely helped me now. And that could be quite a similar kind of environment, but it's also a different kind of stress, I think, because uh, when I was working at those bigger companies, I could get stressed, but it was something that I could then switch off later, and it was like short-term stress. I think as a founder, you almost have like this longer term, and it's more of an exciting stress, and you're doing something that you're passionate about, but it never kind of goes away. Like you're always kind of thinking about it, so it's kind of like something you constantly have to manage. I think that's probably the biggest difference. And also everything's on you, so you can't, if you're sick or um I don't know, if you can't really not care. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes at work you can be like, I'm having a bad day, all I need to do is get through it, and it's a bit different now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if is there anything that you feel is different from working at a fashion company, a traditional fashion company, than maybe what you've seen from your partner or other people working in other industries that you can pinpoint to, or is there a traditional kind of like job that
I think, and again, I I don't I've only ever worked in fashion, but I think what I found at all of the like fashion companies I've worked for, it is like a high pace environment, and it does feel like, even though it's really not, like life and death sometimes, like everything's a really massive deal, and it's kind of exciting and it's really fast paced, and like there's all the creative side of it as well. Um, but I think it's very easy to kind of get swept up in like the culture and the company that you work for, and maybe sometimes that's uh it's not healthy, and not specific companies, but just certain situations that I've been in before, and I don't know how that varies in other industries. um and also I think from my like sustainable perspective now, I can see, having been in these bigger companies, how to make any kind of change is so hard because they're such huge machines, and to get any kind of change instigated into them needs so many people involved and sign-offs, and uh, so it may sound easy to be like, oh, companies should do this, but actually to get that into a company that's existed for so long and is so there's so many there's so many barriers that they have to overcome to make these changes. So not saying that they shouldn't make them, but just like as an understanding from that point of view of like how difficult it can be to make that happen.
Yeah, I think the change is gonna come faster from outside, and I mean, it's probably gonna come from companies, smart companies like ours, that are just gonna push it a little bit faster and adapt a little bit faster. So, and I think that happens in every industry. But it's also good to hear that, you know, having a fast-paced environment, it feels closer also to building a startup in some ways, and you've found ways to manage with that, in your own personal journey and skills. So that's definitely a cool thing, and I think it makes that gap for you also smaller potentially. Um, no, I think what you're building, Daisy, is super exciting, and one of the things that I'm so glad that we have been connected, and shout out to Line for connecting us. um, I think it kind of like energizes me into and basically solidifies this belief that things are changing for a whole for a whole generation, and things are changing. Our mindset is changing. We're valuing things differently. The value that we give to clothes is different, uh, and that's really you know reassuring, and it makes me feel great because it makes me feel hopeful about the future. So I'm really excited about the work that you're doing. Any final comments, any final remarks, or what should we be keeping an eye out for Loom in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, I also agree with you. Like, it feels like there's a real movement happening, and we had our first event last week, and I've been to other like circular fashion events, and this feels like people are so passionate about it, and it's so lovely to see that kind of change happening. And I think it's like the sustainable fashion space in particular, it feels like a really supportive uh community to be a part of. And actually, it was great at our event because I got to see some of our customers meet our designers in person, and like them meet. And I think that was my favorite part of it because I was like, oh wow, it's great to see that something you're building is making these connections. So that was amazing. And I think, yeah, so hopefully launching our new app soon, but focusing a lot on events coming up. So we've got more panel talks and pop-ups coming up in London over the next few months. So yeah, if you have a look at loom.fashion and sign up to our newsletter, we'll keep you updated.
Amazing. That's great. We'll make sure to add some of those dates in the comments as well, for people to attend. And if ever in London, I'll make sure to visit those events. I think it's amazing, and yeah, already in the platform. So I definitely recommend everyone to take a look. Um, Daisy, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so grateful that we are in this journey together, and now connected, and supporting each other. And yes, so thank you so much for sharing all of your journey with us and your experience.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Have a great day then, and we'll chat.
Cool. Thank you so much.